Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I am so excited for all of you to meet and learn from today's guest and fellow entrepreneur. I personally love his business. Not only is it beautiful, but it's so functional and strategic and intentional in the way that they've set up their solutions. And I can already tell, even before hearing today's guest's backstory, that it's the culmination of so much of today's entrepreneur and fellow guest, how much experience he has from his professional career, from his entrepreneurial career. We are all in for a treat because we are being joined by the amazing Josh Kiernan. To tell you a little bit about Josh, Josh is an entrepreneurial visionary with over a decade of experience in technology sales, HR service delivery, and consulting. At his company, Mosh JD, Josh and his team are on a mission to address a long-standing challenge often overlooked in the HR tech space: inaccurate and outdated job descriptions. And heck, I would call all of us entrepreneurs out that none of us stay on top of this stuff. So I love the fact that Josh and his team have brought technology to this space so it can actually stay on top of all the work that's super important that we may not be on top of. He is committed to eliminating the chaos surrounding job descriptions and fixing broken processes vital to improving hiring outcomes, compensation planning, and overall organizational success. As Mosh JD grows, Josh continues to thoughtfully integrate AI technology to help Mosh JD's clients solve meaningful HR and compensation challenges with ease and efficiency. Isn't that the goal in all of our businesses? As an entrepreneur, Josh is driven by his passion for business and ability to simplify complex problems. He's an avid ice hockey player. He is a fellow New Englander like myself, and father who lives in Rhode Island with his wife Julia, two kids Mackenzie and Riley, and dog Duke. No Celtics references there, which is a little bit of a bummer, but that's all good. I'm so excited for us to learn from him today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Josh Kiernan. All right, Josh, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Excited
Heck yes. You have such a cool background, Josh, and I'm really excited to hear how all of it has played into what you're doing with your own company. So let's start there. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Josh? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, thanks. So, I've been in the HR tech space for a long time. I grew up and even in school, years and years ago, I've always wanted to own my own business, start my own business. And, I found a partner I used to work with who had a really good idea. There was an underserved market, and I just jumped at the opportunity. Probably similar to, a lot of people. I in 2020, because of COVID, I was actually laid off at the time, and I think it was the perfect push I needed to just say, I'm just going to go do my own thing and actually give this a shot. So, connected with him, and he had this great idea, and I said, let's do it. So that's how we got Mosh JD started.
Yeah, I love that origin story. Josh, as someone who interviews entrepreneurs for a living, I swear 2020, something magical was in the air, or of course the pandemic was the catalyst for so much of it, but people dove headfirst into their entrepreneurial visions, and it's cool that you had already had that thought in your mind. Take us back to those original thoughts, because I'm glad that you were pushed into it by the pandemic, accelerating that journey, but how long had you been thinking about it, and what did the dream, that visionary business look like in your head?
Yeah, well, I always knew that I wanted to work, for myself and just have the autonomy to control my own destiny and the freedom to, make my own decisions. And, I'm a pretty intense guy, like you mentioned, avid hockey fan. And, I'm kind of one of those who believes you live and die by my own sword, right? I wanted to make my own path. And if I was going to succeed, I wanted it to be on my own doing. And if I was going to fail, I wanted it to be on my own terms. So, ever since this goes back to, high school days, I remember talking with guidance counselors, and, they wanted to know, like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Where do you want to go? I was fortunate enough to graduate pretty high in my class, and had, options of what I could do and where I could go and what career path I could take. And the guidance counselors at the time wanted to push me down a different path. They wanted me to be a teacher, and they wanted me to, go into physics and, those were all things that I could have done. But from that, even from that early stage, I told them I want to work for myself. And I remember guidance counselors saying, well, what do you want to do? What kind of business do you want to own? And at the time I was like, I have no idea. I just know that I want to be my own boss and have my own business. So it goes way back. It's something that's, kind of burned inside me from early on, where I've wanted to have my own organization. I wanted to build something and I wanted to grow it. And, it's a ton of hard work, but there's a ton of reward too. So, happy that, I finally took the jump, and fortunate enough that, I did it with a partner that, is the right partner. We complement each other very well, and we work really well together. So.
Yeah, so well said. Josh, there is so much that I want to dive into specifically about your business, but that's because I've obviously looked into it before we came here on the air together. First things first, I'd love for you to outline what is Mosh JD for listeners who haven't seen it just yet, because it's going to lay the claim, or it's going to really paint the picture of all the cool things that you guys are up to, with simplicity at the heart of it. We're definitely going to go there, but before we do, explain to listeners what Mosh JD is and really how it came to be.
Sure. Yeah. So like you mentioned, Brian, there's this massive problem that's kind of overlooked at organizations, which is the job description. There's thousands of companies where, they have hundreds to thousands of job descriptions that are out of date. They're not accurate. They haven't been updated in a while. There's a lack of communication between parties that need to keep these documents up to date, but they're a foundational component to hiring, to compensation planning, to retention. It touches of various aspects of the business. And so organizations need to keep these documents accurate, but they just haven't. And there's a variety of reasons for that. It's time consuming. There's, no unified understanding of who owns that document. HR teams are responsible for the compliance piece, and compensations are responsible for, benchmarking that to set pay correctly, and recruiters are responsible to bring in talent, versus the job skills in that document. But nobody really owns it, and nobody's responsible for it to the extent that they get evaluated or compensated on it. So it just becomes this mess of a process, and that's what we're looking to clean up, and provide organizations a structure and tool to be able to do that, to do it effectively, to do it quickly, to communicate with their teams, and ultimately have those documents up to date and accurate so that they can do the functions that those documents supplement. So for people who are not in the HR tech industry, I think the best way to describe it is if you think of a CRM, so similar to like a Salesforce or HubSpot, if people are familiar with those, for job descriptions, effectively that's what Mosh JD is. It's a job information system that's designed to house hundreds and to thousands of job descriptions, to make sure that there's channels to make collaboration on those documents easy, so that they're up to date and accurate, permission controls, so that you can govern, who's working on that job document, which version is the most current, which one's published, which one's ready to be put out to the public. So it's essentially, that CRM for job descriptions.
Yeah, I really love that analogy of the CRM for job descriptions, because it's something that we can all grasp, whether we're in that world or not. And that's why I'm really excited to talk simplicity with you today, Josh, because I found it, as soon as I landed on your website, I even fell in love with your headline. I see a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses' websites. Sometimes I read through them. I still have no idea what they do, but your headline is maintain hundreds of accurate job descriptions without thousands of hours of work. And a lot of people reading that, obviously you've outlined some of the things that rely on accurate job descriptions. It's important to the lifeblood of the business. We're talking about compensation, which there's no greater cost in business than the labor that goes into them. And so with all of those considerations, and also knowing that you love technology and you fully embrace technology, paint that picture of the old way of doing things and then the new way that, especially that Mosh JD is creating. I'll throw one final thing in, Josh. I always think about our parents' generation probably used to handwrite their essays in school. We obviously started doing it on computers, and today's kids are doing it with AI in so many different ways, which today's kids are probably wondering, why did anyone ever handwrite it? What's the equivalent in the world of maintaining job descriptions and in the HR space?
Yeah, I think in HR tech in general, and this probably is true for a lot of technology, but it's so easy for organizations, at least in my view, to go down this road of enhancing the system with features and features and features and features. And you can get so complex in a tool that you start to lose sight of what the main objective is. And I've seen so much HR tech in my 15, 20 years doing this that is strong. And there's even, if you think of CRMs too, this is true for CRMs. I think a company like Salesforce is probably in this bucket, where they have a ton of depth and capability, but they end up being so complex that the cost of ownership of those tools is extremely high. So, you have to, sometimes even the worst case scenarios, you have to hire consultants to come in to configure a system because it's got that much capability that you can't even, set it up properly. And so, I'm of the belief that the most powerful solutions are the simple solutions, something that takes something complex and makes it simple. And it's funny, going back to the story about the guidance counselors. That was one of the reasons why they wanted me to be a teacher, because they said I did a really great job of taking a complex, math or physics equation or situation, and then conveying the solution in a simple way so other people could understand it. What the work that went into actually figuring out what that solution was and that formula was to figure out what the answer was very complicated. But then I just had a knack for being able to take it and say, okay, well, explain it to somebody in very layman's terms. And I think that the most powerful solutions give that simple answer to a complex problem. And that's our aim and what to do. And, there's a bunch of examples out there in the world of that. I mean, think of Amazon, how easy they've made it to buy something, right? You can 3 clicks of a button on my phone, I can go in and purchase whatever just came to my mind. That's a very powerful solution. There's no friction in that process. I, need to get a part for, my Jeep that I just got. I'm going to go on here and, order it, 3 clicks, right? So that's our aim. And I think the best solutions I've seen and the ones I admire the most always make it so easy to use, so easy to implement, and, make it so that you can train somebody on the system in a very short time frame. And that's our aim with Mosh JD. It's one of our core values, is we want to make sure that everything we develop and launch is as simple and easy to use as possible.
Yeah, Josh, when I hear you talk about these solutions that you're bringing to your clients and to the marketplace, what I find really fascinating is that you're leveraging entrepreneurial thinking. Obviously, you are the founder of your own business and you are running an entrepreneurial venture, but you're doing it in a space with enterprise level problems. And I think that we're at this really interesting point in time where entrepreneurs, small businesses, we're the ones driving the change, because enterprise level companies, there's so many more layers, there's bureaucracy for them to go through. And so it's a fun place for us to be driving that change. How's it being received on the other end? Because I love the way that you phrase that, of thoughtfully integrating AI technology. You're probably doing it at a rate and with an approach that's different from what these internal HR departments are doing. How's that adoption rate looked like, and what's the reaction been?
Yeah, the reaction's been really positive. All of the enhancements that we've done have been very well received, fortunately. Our process has been to take, client feedback, and what we do is we kind of aggregate that feedback, organize it, and then draw, patterns to say, okay, well, these companies asked for this thing specifically. And then we go very intentionally into a design phase where we're going to map out the capabilities, and then, ultimately look at that UX to say, okay, how can we design this in the most simple way possible? But we're very intentional, specifically with AI. We're very intentional about developing AI, because I feel like in the industry now, what we're seeing, and this is being validated actually now by some of the data coming out of, VCs and other firms who are kind of putting this information out now that they've had some time to really get the data. But what we're seeing is a lot of companies were, kind of quick to deploy some kind of AI solution. And some of them, even didn't really have a very meaningful problem that they were solving. So, those solutions, a lot of them, eventually, I think some of them probably have already, will fall off. And we're seeing, there's actually studies out there about some tech where, the users are dropping off. They're witnessing a lot of churn on their product, and it's because they were kind of quick to deploy, but didn't really think through like the value of that use case. So for us, what we try to do with AI is we try to make sure that we're asking the questions, right? Like if we develop this capability, what's the business impact? Like how impactful is this going to be? How much time will this save our prospects? Can this get them an outcome that otherwise would have been much more painful, whether it's, in time or not having the expertise? And those are kind of the benchmarks we're looking at to develop, something new with AI. I think it's so easy with AI now to just, develop any kind of technology or solution. And I've even used a couple myself where you go and you subscribe to the tool and then you're like, oh, this is cool, but does it really make me more efficient or save me time or solve a problem that I couldn't solve in another method in the same time frame or format? And if the answer is no, then usually I don't use the tool anymore. So we try to deliberately avoid that and make sure that we're bringing real value when we release something that's new with our tool, especially when it comes to AI.
Yeah, I want to piggyback right off of that because you bring up value, and it's clearly so at the core of everything that you do. It's part of your messaging. It's, I imagine, part of your sales process as well, of course. And I think that this is a real big value add and lesson that listeners can pick up for their own businesses is about halfway down your website. I love the fact I've not seen this on many websites that you have an actual calculator that helps potential clients calculate what are my savings going to be. And Josh, where my marketing head goes is we always have heard that phrase in marketing of nobody wants a drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. Of course, they want the results. And so here you and I are talking about a solution for maintaining job descriptions, but you clearly know, and your team very clearly knows, that you're actually selling cost savings, time savings, improved accuracy and compensation. There's so much more to what you're selling that goes far beyond what it is that your core thing does. Talk to us about that calculator. Talk to us about that approach, because it just seems like it shapes the entire way that you show up in the marketplace.
Yeah, well, so we've done the research, and just last year alone, based on and we're talking about United States data now, so Bureau of Labor Statistics, based on hiring, the average salary in the United States, and then voluntary turnover for people who left a company within the first 6 months. Okay, so if we figure that maybe mismatched expectations or inadequate pay resulted in those people deciding to quit within the first 3 months or had some influence in it, like that problem alone is a $36 billion problem in the country. So these numbers are real. And part of the challenge too is like, probably people listening to the podcast are like, job description software, right? I've had a lot of people who are like, a job description software? What? Why can't you just do it in Word or Google Docs, right? So, part of this too for us is trying to help our clients build a case to, leadership and to finance and to people who maybe are not so involved in the HR field or understand the gravity of this problem. And the other piece of the calculator too that we intentionally put in is I've been in the industry, again, for a long time, and I've seen, they used to call them an ROI calculator. And, when we were building this, I was a little bit jaded because I was like, oh, I hate ROI calculators because, they're so subjective, right? You pull the report out and it's like, yeah, okay, well, I could save this much money, but where are these people getting these numbers from? So what we did in our calculator that's different than a lot of the ones I've seen is, we put source links right in there of where we're getting these benchmarks so people can read them. And then we actually made the calculator so that you can slide the figures. So, for example, if I say that there's a compliance risk to my job descriptions, I could put that, percentage risk, which will affect the cost, down to 0. So somebody can go to that calculator and say, okay, well, if the industry benchmark is, 3%, I'm going to say that our legal team's pretty good and we're pretty buttoned up there. I'm going to move this down to 1. So the calculator gives the people who are using it the ability to control that calculator and put their numbers in effectively and see how much would they really be saving with numbers they feel comfortable with. So it's been a great tool for us. I think, that challenge is real with a lot of technology. When people are purchasing tech, they have to go get budget approval. And a lot of times they might be talking to people who don't really understand the problem like the person who wants to buy the software does. And so that calculator has been a great tool for us to help our clients build a case and say, look, this is a really big problem. And, this software provides a ton of value. And based on what we're going to save by using it, it's really, a no-brainer to move forward with these guys.
Yeah, Josh, I knew that time would fly by because obviously you have so much industry expertise, but now I want to switch gears and I want to tap into your founder's mind as opposed to just your industry expert mind, because something that I find so fascinating about businesses like yours is that obviously you work with such a wide array of clientele with regards to business sizes, enterprise level companies, and I love the fact that your model is monthly because you are selling them a tool that they will be able to use on an ongoing basis. Anytime I talk to people with that sort of business model, I know that you guys are obsessed with onboarding processes to really make clients stick. You're obsessed with stick rates. You're obsessed with thinking about all of these important retention things that lead to greater outcomes for your clients, because of course that's how they stick around for a while. Talk to us about those two experiences in particular of onboarding as well as retention, and what other metrics goes through the mind of Josh, the founder and the leader of your business on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, a positive onboarding experience is always, obviously top of the list, and then retention as well. We are very active in communicating with our clients. We like to, have periodic check-ins with them to see how they're using the system, how it's going, how's the project moving along. A lot of times when people come to us, right, they come to us because they have this project to update their job description. So, typically the jobs are, in Google, they're in Word docs, maybe they're in another software. And we even had clients come to us with, I think it was 220 jobs that were all in paper. So, they're looking to digitize and take from paper to this system. And so, it's the initial onboarding is really important, right? We need to make sure that we're working with the client to help them get those jobs into the system, that they're formatted properly, that they, have a process to get those updated once they're in, and, people have the permissions they need to get going and use the system. So that's a big important step for us is we make sure that we're helping them get their jobs in the system, walking them through the system, set up the permissions correctly. And then, once the project starts, we stay in communication. We have, multiple ways for them to get resources. Our system has, help videos on almost every section of the application. They have access to reach out to us right from the app if they need help, email, call. And so those are important for us, the onboarding, retention, and then just getting their, overall feedback in the system. We've got a lot of great response from our clients on how, simple it is, how user-friendly it is, how quick it is to use and learn. And that's really important to us. But we've gotten some other feedback too on areas we can improve the system. And that's something that we want as well. We want to hear, where the system could be stronger, ideas of where we could make enhancements and improvements. And those are key to us as well, because as I mentioned earlier, we put our whole roadmap together based on that feedback. And, we kind of organize what the most, what's, brought to us the most, and move that up on the priority list based on what our clients need. And so those are big things for us. Obviously client retention and satisfaction is always important. And we've been fortunate that our clients love the system. They're happy. Most of them, to your point, some have done like a monthly option with us, but a lot of them have done annual packages and then even multi-year packages as well. So that's definitely a good indicator for us that people are happy if they're willing to sign long-term agreements.
Yeah, and so much of it, really what's radiating from all of your answers today is just that commitment to value. Even those small, tiny details. Listeners, I hope you're picking them up when Josh shares them with us, but even just, it sounds like you've invested so much time into creating walkthrough videos, help videos. They can quickly access your team from wherever they are in the app. It's these small things that lead to that. That's why, listeners, I always say that success leaves clues. Pick these up from Josh and all of these answers. So, Josh, sticking on the theme of you as the entrepreneur, the co-founder co-founder, the CEO of your company. I also know how addicting entrepreneurial ventures can be, but you are also a dad. You're also a husband. You also have your personal life and hobbies that you're interested in. How do you balance all this stuff? Is your mind always on business, even at the dinner table? I know you've got a business partner as well. How do you balance all of the things in life and business?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, a lot of people said I was crazy for starting this with two young kids, and hockey is more of a fun thing, but it ends up being late at night. But then there's implications of that as well. I'm at the rink late. You get to bed late, wake up the next day, and you're dehydrated because you just physically exerted yourself and tried to go to sleep quick so you can get up the next morning. But it's been challenging, but it's also I'm sure everyone who's an entrepreneur who's listening can agree. And when you're doing something for yourself, it's not the same as a 9 to 5. My mind is always on the business. Sometimes I have to put that down, right? Because you have to be a dad as well, and a family, family man, and pay attention to your loved ones, and that can be challenging when you get 500 things in your mind about the business. But it's definitely easier to me at least, than having a regular 9 to 5 job. Like, I enjoy what I'm doing. I've altered my schedule quite a bit, and at first it was difficult. But I've gotten used to it. I get up, usually like 4:30 in the morning, a couple days a week. I'll go to the gym. I'll get a workout in. That's been really a good habit for me to get into, because then I feel energized. I'll usually run to the coffee shop, do a little work before the kids get up. And so I kind of get a jump on my day. I'm energized. I'm ready to go. And then, I'll work during the day after I get the kids to school, sometimes at night. But, really it's a lot sometimes, but, sometimes it's not, because you're doing it for yourself, and there's a lot of pride in that. And I enjoy what I'm doing. So, you make the schedule work.
Yeah, Josh, one thing I always say so frequently on the air is that the juice is worth the squeeze. You just described balancing so many of these difficult things. You definitely lost me at 4:30 in the morning, but you picked me back up again at the coffee shop. And it's these real life balances, sometimes sacrifices that we do because we're working on something much bigger than ourselves. And I don't normally ask this on the air, but just hearing your love for operating efficiently and making all the things fit in that you want to accomplish, I'd love to hear behind the scenes, just also knowing that you've got a team that's working behind the scenes as well. What are some of your favorite internal tools or processes or workflows that you look at and that you really refine to make sure that you guys are growing so efficiently?
Yeah. There's quite a bit of them. I think we've done a really good job of putting together a tech stack that is affordable. That's really helped us grow. There's some pretty good tools. We use a lot of tools that a lot of people use, like Google Analytics, and we use SEO tools like Ahrefs. There's some good marketing tools like Meet Alfred that we use. That's really great. It gives me the ability to automate some of the connections and requests on LinkedIn. So there's been some great tools like that, but we've set up quite a few tools that have help make things really efficient, that are surprisingly affordable. Like, a good example is Jira is a pretty well-known tool in the tech space, and I thought it would be more expensive, but it's not. It's a great tool to help manage the bugs in the tool that need to be fixed, communication with the developers about enhancements, and keep everything organized. So we're very intentional about trying to make sure that, even though we're not a huge organization, right, and we're not looking to spend a huge amount of money on these tools, we try to do a really good job, or at least as best we can, of setting up processes that eliminate a lot of the manual work and make sure everything is as organized as possible. And so, those are a couple examples of some tools that we use, but we use some others, like HubSpot's a great CRM. We use HubSpot, and it's affordable. They have good plans for companies that are growing, and that helps us manage our client and prospect relationships and keep it very organized. So there's a ton of great tools out there that are cost effective and can automate a lot of different workflows for growing companies.
Yeah, I really appreciate those insights. Shout out to HubSpot, good Boston-based company. And listeners, well, actually, Josh, I'll first say this to you, is that I really trusted going there with you here in real time on the air, because it's so clear to me that you don't just love the HR side of things, but you really dig into the business, the entrepreneurial side of things. And I so appreciate that about you. And with that in mind, listeners, what I really hope that you take away from Josh's whole approach here is how much he thinks like a builder. You see that it doesn't take a huge budget or huge tech stack in order to make these things happen. When you go to Josh's website, you're going to assume that they are powered by incredibly expensive software, because they're doing amazing things, but they're doing it in a way that is entrepreneurial in nature. And I so value that in you, Josh. So with that in mind, I'm excited to see where you take this last question, because it's super broad, so you can go in any direction you want. And that is, what's your one best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are a fellow entrepreneur yourself, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I'd say, oh man, one piece of advice. I'd say, especially for people who are looking to get into entrepreneurship, I would be very selective of who you pick for your partners and your co-founders. I was in a business as an owner before Mosh, and that partnership was not a good one. And I think it's if you're going to be a partner in an organization or have investors, I think that's the best piece of advice I can give, is make sure you choose those partners wisely and as deliberately as you can. Because if you don't have a good partnership with your co-founders, with your investors, then it just inhibits everything. That first venture I was in didn't work out, and because of those dynamics, there was nothing we could do that would have made it work out. And fortunately, I was a little more selective in venture 2, and it was probably the best decision I've ever made, because when you're grinding away and you're slogging through growing a company, and there's days where things are broken and you're trying to fix everything, and something goes wrong, it's critical to have the right partner on your team, and to have somebody that you trust and that trusts you, and you can get through those challenging times. It's such a critical piece of the business. My co-founder Mike, I couldn't say better things about him. We work so well together. I trust him 100%. And, we've been fortunate. Clients have been very happy with the system, like I mentioned. And, we've had great retention, but, we're certainly not perfect. And there's been things that have gone wrong and things that we've messed up. And, we've gotten through it, great together, because we work so well together and we have such a great relationship. So I'd say that's probably my biggest piece of advice, is make sure you choose those people very wisely.
Yes, important advice at that Josh, you and I have only gained through the years of experience. It's the only way. So I'm super grateful for you fast tracking our listeners with that piece of advice. It's like a marriage. I mean, you have to talk about money together. You have to have difficult conversations together. You have to celebrate wins together. There's so much that goes into it. So I love that advice. Powerful advice for all of our listeners. Think about it. Every step of the way, you always have to consider that advice. So Josh, you've been such a wealth of knowledge. I'm a big fan of your company, very clearly. I've tooted your horn just a little bit here in this episode, because you guys are doing so many things right. And I love seeing great people and great companies grow and serve great clientele. So for listeners who want to check it out and pick up all those success clues that you're leaving along the way, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to check out our website, it's www.moshjd, which J as in job and D as in description.com. And you can find me as well on LinkedIn. Just, search for Joshua Kiernan. You'll be able to find my profile. We have a business LinkedIn page as well, but, feel free to reach out to me as well. If you listen to the podcast and you want to pick my brain or share some ideas, feel free to shoot me a DM. I'd be happy to hear from any of the listeners.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. I will also add, as the host of a podcast with over 1,100 episodes, I know that so few listeners are daring enough to ever reach out, but you see how accessible Josh is here today, and he loves this stuff. So if you want an amazing entrepreneur in your network, pound those links down below wherever it is that you're tuning in. Otherwise, Josh, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, Brian, thanks. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.